Alright everyone, welcome back again to more Misericorde. Catherine made time for everyone. I'm sorry if it feels like we haven't made any time for you, Flora. I can try harder. But I like being alone. She started sobbing again. I was bewildered by this contradiction, but Margaret just smiled. I do understand. I really do. Us old fogies aren't much fun to be around, are we? Flora shook her head and Margaret chuckled. We're all you have, I'm afraid. Not if I leave. You can't leave, Flora. None of us can. Our vows are perpetual. They don't have to be. I mean, Hedwig. She pointed at me weakly. Hedwig broke hers and she was an anchoress or what have you. That was different, Flora. How? I had an answer for this, but I couldn't share it. Instead, I had to stew in the uncomfortable silence between the three of us. I'm certain that's a more complicated situation, Flora. Well, maybe I could be complicated. I'd be happy telling people it was so complicated if I asked how I could leave. There's always other convents you could transfer to one day. You could go to London or Spain. I'm sure they have a lot more nuns your age and abbeys that aren't in the middle of nowhere like our boring old place. Remember when Catherine and you were planning a visit to Italy? Yeah. Maybe we can try and put something like that together again for you. I just hate to see you break your vows and throw your life away. Would that be so bad? Yes. The two of them turned to look at me inquisitively. A trace of the same rage I had sensed earlier flickered behind Margaret's eyes, but I forged onward. Take it from me, Flora. Don't break your vows. Your life might feel difficult sometimes, but those struggles are nothing compared to the regret you would feel breaking that oath. If the guilt didn't consume you, the world would. No man would marry you. No lord would want your service. You would have nowhere to go but back to the church. And then you'd be right back where you started, feeling all the same things with the added yoke of despair that no matter how hard you threw yourself into the work, no matter how much you believed in your vows this time, that you had made that choice, that you were once an apostate. That's a milestone that you could never take off. Flora looked ready to burst into tears again. Margaret had cast her eyes to the floor. How would you know? Because this is how I feel every day, Flora. Sister Margaret is right. It's my choice. My choice was complicated. But I've regretted it every day since, and I will for every waking moment of my life. You don't want to end up like me. Hedwig is right, Flora. Leaving this life can be very tempting, but there's really nowhere else to go. I don't know. I don't know if that makes me feel any better. I promise I'll do whatever I can to make you feel more at home here. Hedwig will too. Won't you, Hedwig? Yes, of course. Thank you. She sniffled and pulled her hand away from Margaret's. If she wants to leave, she can leave. It's just, I don't know what opportunity she can get during the year, like it's 1919 there, right? So, and I believe she was forced into the convent to begin with. So I don't know, maybe she could find something. But at the moment, I think she's better off staying here where she has people she can rely on. It's tough though. She twirled her thumbs together in her lap and feebly attempted a smile. I guess it's just the wine. I mean, where would I go? You can still travel the world if you really want to. There's no reason we can't ask the Superior to send you somewhere nice one day. We just don't want you to throw your life away. Believe me, everyone in this room has been where you are right now. Really? When I was your age, I once tried to escape in the back of the delivery cart. I was going to hop off in a village and get a boat across the lake. From there, I'd hitchhike to London, marry a wealthy man. Maybe a visiting dignitary or something of that sort. I had big ideas. Why didn't you? Margaret grinned. Her eyes were slightly glassy. Catherine had more or less the same conversation with me that we're having with you now. She begged me to stay. She asked what she could do to convince me. And, well, that's when I said I wanted to play the lute. We all remained silent for a moment. Flora, forgive me, but earlier you said you had two ideas. Is there something someone could do? Oh, that. No, it was nothing. Go on. Tell us. Well, I was gonna ask if you could teach me what you know about illumination, Hedwig. After all, I'd need some skills if I were to ever leave, wouldn't I? You wanted to steal a bunch of gold paint to fund your life on the run as an artist? Margaret started to giggle. Flora looked affronted at first, but eventually joined in with quite the chuckle of her own. Shove off. No, I like it. It's better than my plan was. Well, I'm rubbish at drawing, so a bit of a non-starter. Hedwig will teach you. Won't you, Hedwig? Margaret's tone was light, but she was looking at me with grim intensity. Of course I will. I can't promise much. I've only ever worked on eliminated Bibles, but just the basics. That's all I need. That's right. It's a good start to somewhere. Catherine taught me about music, and she wasn't exactly Hildegard. Flora stood up from her chair. She was wobbly on her feet, a reminder that she was still very, very drunk. As she lurched towards me, she threw her arms around me unannounced, marking the second time this evening that I had no idea how to respond to somebody's touch. Thanks, Hedwig. You're alright, you know that? Well, give the lady some space, Flora. She probably doesn't want to smell your wine breath. Why don't you go eat something? Flora released me from her embrace and gave Margaret a vaguely affirmative hand gesture. She spun around her heel, still a little unbalanced, and wandered off towards the table. Goodness. I haven't seen anyone get that pissed in a while. Did I say something wrong? I don't think so. I think we did the best we could. Did you mean it? Mean what? About breaking your vows? Do you really feel that way? Oh, yes. There's no sense in walking things backward. Huh. Why did you do it then? In retrospect, I probably would not have made the same decision. That's why I felt it was worth telling Flora. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. Well, lovely chatting with you. She picked up her lute from the chair next to the one Flora had been sitting in, and then left to put it back on the shelf. Crumbs, what's gotten into you, Flora? Catherine had wandered over to our side of the Misericorde, nursing a drink in one hand and resting the other on her lap, on her hip. I think she just had a little too much to drink. Too right. I had her bawling over here and thought to stay out of it, but now she's at the table yammering on and on about cats. How are you faring? Me? Having fun? To a degree. We've been consoling Flora. It worked. She's back to being quite irritating. Well, you can thank Hedwig. She's the expert. Ooh. Did you impart some of your anchoress wisdom? Yes, I suppose I did. It was tough, but it was what Flora needed to hear. Marvelous. I still remember visiting your odd little window and asking all about something or other. You were quite a blunt instrument, if I recall. Was I? I once came to the window to ask what the punishment for breaking a promise was. You were prepared with a whole lecture about how I shouldn't be taking any oaths in the first place, with several citations from Matthew on hand, of course. I'm afraid I don't remember that. It was years and years ago. That doesn't surprise me. Do you remember many of our questions? Do you know who asked what? I remember questions, but not who asked them. And I wouldn't tell anyone if I did. Good. I mean, not why I was asking, but good. Oh, why were you asking? So, how's your first thingy? Oh, it's been fun. Don't worry about Flora. Someone always cries at one of these. Sometimes more than one person. Oh no. It's her more often than not. Me? Me crying? Absolutely untrue. I have a reputation to maintain. Uh-huh. Adela's flipped the table over, someone started getting weepy. I'd say you're getting about as rigorous in education and Misericorde etiquette as you possibly could have. It's certainly been a learning experience. Oh, but it's been fun, right? We're having fun. Catherine was just as wine-addled as Flora had been, but it was clearly affecting her differently. Flora had almost seemed like a different girl. Catherine was simply multiplied. Whatever clarity she had been experiencing when we chatted by the fire earlier had been enhanced with a slightly manic energy. I'm having fun. Yes, absolutely. Good, good. Because you know the superior would have me hanged if you didn't have a good time. Really? She put you up to this? Oh, good heavens, no. I can just intuit these things. You know? I can just see her bearing down on me because you complained. I don't complain to the superior. That's good. I mean, not that you have anything to complain about. Sorry, I wasn't insinuating you would complain, just that. By the way, actually, did you know the cow Angela complained about me to her once? To get back at me for... I forgot where I was going with this. You were gonna sit down and take it easy, I think. Yes. Thank you, Margaret. Yes, I was. I could sense that my window was closing. Catherine was a very different kind of drunk than Flora, but it seemed like she too was not far from falling to the floor. Actually, Margaret, could you give us a minute? Of course. She looked a little confused, but she obliged. Love her. Very clever. Isn't she just... Margaret's wonderful. Catherine, I've been meaning to ask you something, and it's very important. If it's about the cat, it isn't mine. No, it's not about the cat. And I need to get Eustace or one of the other crafty ones to help me with my door. I'm sorry if it bothers you. Does the door bother you? No, it's... It was now or never. James. I spoke to James. He says you can vouch for him about the night Catherine II died. Can you? Is that true? Catherine's brow furrowed slowly, and her eyes adjusted in a strange and unexpected manner. It was like I had forcibly sucked the wine off her somehow. You spoke to James? What did he say? Not much at all. He professed his innocence, though, and he said you might be able to prove it. Something to do with his traveling cloak. What traveling cloak? The one Darcy found. I was speaking in a whisper lower than I had known I was capable of. I was terrified that someone might overhear, but there was no turning back now. Not here. We can't talk about this here. Not with everyone else around. Then when? And where? Everyone turned to look at the door in unison. Are we expecting something? Perhaps Sister Darcy has brought some more food. Moira, who had been sitting close to the door, stood up to answer at first. She removed the bolt, swung open the door, and... What was that? Moira fell into her backside and scrambled away from the door on all fours. Everyone else screamed and wailed as soon as they saw what was at the door. The same hulking figure that had threatened me at the end of the hallway all those nights ago. The cloaked figure lumbered forward, its metal boots thudding against the stone floor. Everyone had made for the back of the room as fast as they could, all yelling at the top of their lungs. I myself felt absolutely petrified, but I could not bring myself to move. I just stood there assuredly, white as a sheet, unable to move. I felt like my heart would give up if I took even one step. That monster took another labored step toward me. I stood there, dumbstruck, as it brought itself before me. A gauntleted hand reached under its cloak, and with a horrible grinding shriek, it drew its sword. Everyone screamed again. They were practically baying. Cease your feeble inquiries, Sister Hedwig. I'm not afraid of you. Could you believe that this was not a lie? Faced with the sword, I felt an odd sense of peace. The glint of the blade in the candlelight, it offered me a noble release from the predicament I found myself in. Do not force my hand. Cease. Did you not hear me? I am not afraid. Then you truly are a fool. Strike me down then. I'll gladly die in service of the Lord. I'll gladly give myself in defense of what is right and just. If you would have me killed for pursuing the truth, then so be it. Huh? I could practically hear everyone's head tilting in confusion at once. A musical chord of rustling fabric. I grow tired of this conversation. Consider this a warning. Still pointing their sword at me, the figure took a lurching step backward, only to trip on its own cloak. Uh-oh. Who is a liar? Don't tell me it's Darcy. The woman who had been held behind me rushed forward. Adela grabbed the sword that had fallen out of the assailant's hand and held it at their neck. Adela, stop! Remove your disguise, Kerr, before I cut off your head and remove it myself. The cloaked figure held up their hands defensively. Their hands looked far too small for the bulky gauntlets they wore. I glanced down at their legs and was shocked to see that they were twisted and broken. Your legs! Are you alright? Oh yes, let's make sure these creeps' legs are unharmed. Stop! My legs are alright. The voice sounded less ragged and imposing now. The figure shifted their weight and I realized that the big metal boots they had been wearing had simply come off in a tumble. With a sense of resignation, the monster lifted its head to the black cloth mask concealing its face end. Oh, it's Eustace. Surprise. Touch me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see. Okay. I had a feeling it wasn't the actual, what you call, enigmatic figure, because it actually knocked on the door and just came in, and I figured it was one of the nuns disguising themselves as, to scare them. Eustace, it was you? Yes. Wait a minute. So you're telling me Hedwig's ghost prank was actually your prank? That's right. Eustace winced as she pulled herself to her feet. My most elaborate ever. I know you enjoy tormenting people with your practical jokes, but this is a bit much. Hang on. I don't enjoy tormenting people. That was terrifying. I was so confused. I was dumbfounded. Part of me was relieved to discover that the ghost I had been seeing was not a ghost at all, but the other part of me was feeling something. Anger? Deceit? Upset? Also, I still think it was a ghost she saw. I think this was just a different type of, what you call disguise for Eustace. Like, there's two separate ones. One is Eustace in disguise, and the other was the actual enigmatic figure of a knight that was chopping off goats' heads, apparently. Or sheep's. Can't remember anymore. Sheep's or goats, either way. Indescribable towards Eustace. Eustace, why? Well, that's a good question. Mostly because I thought it would be funny. Rather a large miscalculation there, I'm afraid. You thought it was funny the first time. I thought it was funny when I thought this character was something Hedwig made up. Now that I know you actually went and dressed up like a nasty devil and scared her, and now all of us witless, I'm reevaluating. So was Hedwig right when she told us? Did you really kill a goat? Eustace looked at me with a cold but clearly wounded expression. No. I think perhaps that Hedwig was so overcome with shock that she saw something in the shadows that wasn't there. See, I think what she saw was the actual knight figure, ghost, whatever, chopping off the head of a goat. Whereas this one, Eustace, is a different take altogether. Entirely reasonable, I should think. You were waving a flaming sword around according to her description. That's a point. No fire this time. Or did Hedwig imagine that too? It seemed like a waste of oil. Not to mention it's not good for the blade. Eustace beckoned for Adela to pass the sword back. Adela's eyes narrowed. Absolutely not. Come on. I'm the sacrist. Sacrist. I've got to put it back. I do not think this is behavior befitting a sacrist. And disrespecting Sister Catherine's sword in this manner. Shameful. We should tell a superior about this. You're overreacting slightly, I think. I disagree. Catherine's sword? I was so angry that I couldn't help but blurt this thought out as soon as it entered my head. Did you not know this, Sister Hedwig? I scrambled to say something that would allay any suspicion. I spoke to Angela about what happened to Catherine, and she said it was the delivery man's sword. Angela thinks she's smarter than she is, although why she would try to deceive you about that, I have no idea. So, it really was Catherine's? Well, it certainly wasn't the delivery boy's. Do you know how much a sword costs? Especially one of that size? So, how on earth was it Catherine's? It wasn't actually hers. She just liked to borrow it from the library. And you let her? I refuse to be questioned on this by someone who barely knows me and who didn't know her at all. You are not in a position to act superior to anyone right now, Eustace. I don't know if we need to tell soup, but that was not on Eustace. Margaret, I know for a fact you and Catherine used to plan and execute far worse. I'm innocent. Catherine II. I think you should calm down, Eustace. I'm sorry, we didn't find this prank particularly amusing. You threatened to kill poor Hedwig. I pretended to threaten her. Oh, well, in that case, remind me, Margaret, what happened to the Superior before ours? That was nothing like this, and you know it. Yes, it was significantly worse. What are you talking about? Nothing. It was before your time, and before Eustace's for that matter, so she should keep it out of her mouth. I heard enough about it. Straight from you and her. Stop making this about me. This is about you and your stupid ghost costume. Waving a sword in Hedwig's face? Honestly, how could you? It beggars belief that you'd attempt to flip this around on anyone else. Eustace looked around the room, but nobody offered any support. She was breathing heavily and looked as if she were about to cry. Once she was certain nobody was coming to her rescue, she focused on me. Hedwig. I had struck her so hard my hand stung. Eustace's face was redder than the evening's wine. I realized that I must have scraped her face with my fingernails during the swipe, as there was just a touch of blood on her cheek. I half expected her eyes to start welling up with tears, but she just stood there. Perhaps she was dumbstruck. You're cruel, Eustace. Cruel and nasty. Did you enjoy making me feel small? Hedwig. I instinctively raised my hand again, although this time I was held back by several of the women behind me. Easy now. Have you ever said anything earnest to me, Eustace? Have you spoken to me truthfully even once? Of course I have. How can I trust you, ever? I tried futilely to lunge at her again, but I was not strong enough to overcome the several people gripping my arm and shoulders. I don't know. I don't like you. That is fair. Let's all calm down now, yeah? Yes, I think that's quite enough theater for the night. What's going on? Tonight's outing to the Misericorde has concluded, I think. Boo! Blame Eustace, I suppose. It is getting quite late, though. I'll be getting on. She slunk away from the group and out the door too quickly for me to object. Yeah, she did. She found the perfect outing to get the hell out of there, to avoid questioning. The other women who had been holding on to me finally loosened their grips. All except for Moira, who patted me on the shoulder consolingly. Let's get you to bed, Hedwig. I nodded, but I kept looking at Eustace. She looked pathetic. She was not openly crying, but I swear I heard a sniffle as Moira piloted me past her and out of the room. The others were following suit, muttering to each other in quiet conversation. Once we were out in the hallway, I realized just how stuffy and airless the Misericorde had felt. I took in a breath of fresh air and felt a slight pang of regret, enough to make me turn around to see if Eustace had left the room. Moira tugged me away quickly. I think that's enough for tonight, I don't know. I think I should apologize. Well, you can do that tomorrow. Right now, what I think you need is some rest. I hit her quite hard. As well you should have, if I'm being frank. What a horrible practical joke. There was a slight twinkling sound as her foot collided with an empty tincture bottle I had left on my bed earlier. Oops, sorry. Oh no, it's my fault. It must have fallen off the bed. What was in it? She shut the door behind her and sat me down on my bed, and just like she had on my first day out of my cell. Nothing. Not anymore, at least. It was something Darcy gave me earlier. Best to be careful drinking anything Darcy gives you. It was actually rather helpful. She said it would give me confidence. Well, we'll have to tell her it was a rousing success, won't we? We both chuckled. What a day, huh? Yes, quite a day. I smiled weakly at her for a moment, but I couldn't maintain the charade for long. I burst into tears. Moira had a sympathetic cooing sound and put her hands on my shoulders. I shrugged them off quickly. I had quite enough people attempting to restrain me for one night. Instead, she offered the front of her robe for me to dry my eyes on, which I did accept. There. I think this was all a bit much for you in one go, perhaps. Is it always like this? It feels like the whole Abbey just fell apart, and it's all my fault. Well, this definitely wasn't one of our better nights, but... No, I can think of worse. Really? Don't forget someone died not too long ago. I think that might still top you having a little too much to drink, don't you? Oh, silly me. But even so, we have some colorful personalities here. It's not the first time we've had a minor clash. But I hit her. I had no idea I was even capable. I'm a freak. I should have never left my cell. Marta's stronger than she looks, you know. She clapped Flora on the cheek more times than I can count. And I'm sure she'll smack Adela one of these days if they keep arguing about the sherry. Oh. And, well, I think Darcy's gotten into it with Catherine before. Although, that might just have been under the influence of a particularly bad mushroom. That doesn't count. The details are different, but I'll be honest with you. I think most people remember the boiling over, not what was in the pot. Still, would you believe that I've gotten slapped a few times? What? Why? She chuckled again and leaned down to give me a kiss on the forehead. So condescending. Ah, that bitch. Kissing me on the head. How dare her. Now, I'm happy to gossip, but I think I have the right to withhold gossip about myself. Wouldn't you agree? I suppose that makes sense. You can ask Eustace about it, I'm sure. Maybe that's a good way to start mending that bridge. Or you could ask Angela. I'm sure she'd have a particularly dramatic version to share. I groaned into her robe. Oh dear. I have to work with Eustace. We all have to work together, Hedwig. How? In that same room. It's gonna be horrible. You'll find a way. We always do. She gently tugged her robe away from me. There was an amazingly soggy patch on her chest, visible even on the black fabric in the dim moonlight. I'll see you at service tomorrow? Of course. Good. Get some sleep. You'll feel better in the morning. I promise. She made to leave. When she opened the door, I could hear Angela commenting to her from the landing. It would seem I left just before things got interesting. Yes, well, there's always next time. She shut the door behind her and their conversation became too muffled to focus on. I collapsed onto the bed, spread-eagled, and then half-heartedly attempted to get into it properly. I stared at the ceiling, unsure what to do. It was late, but there was absolutely no chance I was going to fall asleep anytime soon. Something felt wrong inside me. Despite Moira's assurances that things would continue as usual, I felt as if I had just stepped across a threshold equally as dramatic as the one I had crossed when I left my cell. Eustace's cruel joke had thrown so much of the past few weeks into question, but nonetheless, I felt a bit ill. I rubbed the hand that I had struck her cheek with. I could still feel the sting lingering. She had terrified me. Not just me, but the entire room full of women. For what? All in the service of some hazing ritual? The Superior had warned everyone about that. I realized that she would have only mentioned it if it had been a problem prior. Perhaps this was typical. Perhaps I was unaccustomed to the space I now occupied, unprepared for how adversarial and mean-spirited it was. As it was, there was no denying that over the past few weeks, and tonight especially, I had observed a community on the rocks. It wasn't just Eustace and I. It was Angela and Catherine, Adela and Charity, Flora, and, well, everyone else. Those weren't the only conflicts either. All in all, it seemed this place was kind of a nexus of misery and resentment. I was restless. Sighing deeply, I got up off the bed and quietly crept to my door. There was no conversation emanating from any of the rooms or the hallway. It seemed as if everyone had succeeded where I could not. I did my best to stay silent as I collected a pricket from the mantel and lit the candle in the fireplace and headed out for a stroll. That's not wise. In the middle of the night, you're probably going to see that ghost night again. It was quite cold out now. I thank God for my cozy robes. The thick woolen fabric did an admirable job protecting me from the elements, and I could ball up the extra fabric of my oversized sleeve to keep my free hand warm. I wandered back and forth across the landing a few times. I was a lot more confident spending time alone outside now that Eustace had outed herself as a mysterious stalker. I descended the stairs nearest the dorm and did a few slow laps to the cloister deep in thought. Should I tell the Superior? I felt uneasy about this. Margaret and a few others had seemed to balk at Adela's idea of involving her. Then again, I would have to report to her sooner or later, and it would be hard to pretend nothing had happened, especially since I had not even gotten the answer from Catherine that I had promised to make my priority. Oh well, had not been for lack of trying. Perhaps I could corner Catherine before service tomorrow. She hadn't seemed unwilling to talk at all, just unwilling to do it in the company of others, which I could understand. On the other hand, what if Eustace had handed me the evidence I needed anyway? Who else could have beheaded someone but the woman with the access to that sword? How cavalier Eustace had been with her threats too. Seashore meddling. In retrospect, Eustace's attempt at a booming authoritative voice had been a little unconvincing. I had been swept up in the moment, I suppose. Nonetheless, her threat seemed quite targeted. It was not the first time Eustace had advised me to keep my nose clean. Also, the weird thing was, how the hell did she know she was questioning someone? Unless she was just guessing, like she just happened to pick the right question at the right time. I took a turn out of the cloister and into the paths between mostly unused rooms and buildings the Superior had led me past on the way to the hospital. The brisk night air was doing something helpful for my thoughts, at the very least, and I wanted to stretch my legs further. Eustace controlled access to the sword, there was no doubt about that. Thinking more in the situation, was there really any other reason needed to finger her as the perpetrator? Catherine had been beheaded, and the wretched tool had been left in the cloister as an ill omen. I had no idea why Eustace would want to kill Catherine, but was that my responsibility to find out? I had been charged with finding Catherine's killer. Catherine had been killed with a sword. The one sword in the Abbey resided under a lock and key, a key that Eustace controlled. What else was there to it? As I wandered the path towards the outer wall of the Abbey, I became surer and surer of this line of reasoning. Why did the why matter? I was not here to judge. I thought about Flora. If Eustace was found guilty and handed over to the diocese, maybe the clouds surrounding the Abbey would part. Maybe she could be happy. I thought about Catherine. Something was weighing on her, and it was clearly something to do with the night of Catherine II's death. Had she seen something? Was she simply too afraid to speak? She certainly left in a hurry after Eustace's little stunt backfired. This too might be resolved if Eustace was found to be the guilty one. I reached the end of the courtyard and stood in the shadow of the crumbling outer wall. Goodness, they really should have built the gate here. Anyone could come into the Abbey from this direction if they braved the hill and the cold. It could have been anyone. And yet, the longer I turned things over in my head, the more I thought about the ghost stories people had told earlier in the evening. That cloud of negativity. Maybe it really was haunting. Eustace had been dressing up as my ghost, but what about Flora's? Adela's? Was every ghost here a tale born of Eustace's mean streak? I found that hard to believe as much as that astounded me. Demons and devils. They infested this place. I saw a light in the distance. My heart dropped out of my chest.